Good morning, Vande Matram. Welcome all of you. So, here in this process of Savitri summarization in this session, we are going to have a night in look into the topic Woman, thy husband suffers. That is the terrible voice being voiced by the Lord of Death. From this chapter onwards, we will have a very brief discussion on the debate and of course the adventure of the soul. So here already we have seen that is the death has been occurred in the forest, the destined spot, the destined time, everything is already finalized. We have seen everything. So death has been over. So we have seen Satyavan almost it is dead, and Savitri feels they are no more alone in the vast woods, something somber, grand, unearthly. So that is a big safe. Of course, his presence is felt by Savitri. She knew the visible death was standing there, and Satyavan had passed from her embrace. So he is no more. He is dead. So later we will go for the topic of discussion into the Towards the Black Void, Book 9 and Canto 1. Here, Towards the Black Void, this is the short discussion. Of course, it is in the caption Savitri summarization. We will go for the topic of discussion. Woman, thy husband suffers. So, like this, the topic starts. So, we'll go and see. Relax thy grasp, woman. Relax thy grasp. This body belongs to earth and dying. His soul belongs to a greater power. So already this thing we have seen will in the different parts of discussion we have discussed and we have seen, but right now we will see and how it is working here right now in this topic of discussion, how the scenario is there after the death of Satyavan. Savitri is left alone in this huge wood, and we'll find here the visible death will be standing there, and we'll find listen to her voice. That is the topic we are going to discuss, of course, in brief. Awful situation, naturally, no doubt of it, and we'll proceed little step by step into that topic. So now she left alone in the huge wood. Sri Aurobindo quotes. So was she left alone in the huge wood, surrounded by a dim, unthinking world. Surrounded by a dim, unthinking world, left alone in the huge wood. Her husband's corpse on her forsaken breast. Husband already dead, so it is given husband's corpse. It is finally last yesterday we concluded he is no more, and finally we find her husband's corpse on her forsaken breast. Then, in her vast silent spirit, motionless, she measured not her loss with helpless thoughts, because it is she had the foreknowledge before at least 1 year. So nothing is a great, nothing matters in a big way, because she knows, she had the idea, she is well prepared for that one, not only physically or mentally, but in the spiritual preparation was too grand. She measured not her measured not her loss with helpless thoughts, nor rent with tears the marble seals of pain. Marble seals of pain, she is not actually rending her tears. She rose not yet to face the dreadful God. That much prepared, that much adamant. She knows it is coming, well prepared for that. Over the body she loved, her soul leaned out in a great stillness without stir or voice, as if her mind had died with Satyavan. As if her mind had died with Satyavan, there is no stir in the mind, she is totally silent. But still, the human heart in her beat on. Mind seems to be dead, but her human heart in her beat on. Aware still of his being near to hers, closely she clasped to her the mute, lifeless form. Then we'll proceed little bit. We'll step forward, step ahead. Last year in the course, beautiful. Only the spirit sees and all is known. Then a calm power seated above our broads is seen. Calm power seated above our broads is seen. Unshaken by our thoughts and deeds, nothing matters. Its stillness bears the voices of the world. Its stillness, the power, calm power, about the calm power it is written. Its stillness bears the voices of the world. Immobile, it moves nature, looks on life. Then its gaze controls the turbulent wheel of things. To mate with the glory it sees, the spirit grows. The voice of life is turned to infinity sounds. Then we can little bit proceed further. A new sight comes in new voices in us form, a body of the music of the gods. Immortal yearnings without name leap down. Large quiverings of Godhead seeking run and weep upon a puissant field of calm, a high and lowly ecstasy of all. So this in a moment's depth was born in her. She is things are changing fast, and she is being prepared because this is the prepared soul. She is all the divine mother we know, and all preparation in the material in the human form is also that much magnificent. The spirit who had hidden in nature soared out of his luminous nest within the worlds. Like a vast fire, it climbed the skies of night. That great comparison you just know. Like a vast fire, it climbed the skies of night. Thus were the cords of self-oblivion torn. Like one who looks up to far heights she knew, she saw, ancient and strong as a windless summit. We can go a little bit further still. A force descended, then later we can see a force descended, trailing endless heights, linking time second to infinity. That descent of force is there, we can see it clearly. So inevitably it girded the earth and her. It sank into her soul and she was changed because she has to fight not with the sword or any atom bomb because it is the war within her breast that is an we know you know it is the war of soul. So, here in the course letter, we can find doer of her works and fountain of her words, invulnerable by time and omnipotent. It stood above her, calm, immobile, mute. So, whatever we have gone so far, let us summarize in a couple of lines, then we'll go further, further discussion we'll see. So this is, already we have seen book 9, Canto 1, the towards the black void. Savitri is alone in the huge forest with the dead body of her husband on her breast. That's what we have already observed, we have seen, we have discussed. She does not grieve, but leans over his body in great stillness. Suddenly, a change comes over her, like what sometimes overtakes man in moments of the crisis. Because physically, outwardly, she is in crisis, but actually, she is well prepared. She knows. The mind is no more, only the spirit sees. A calm power seated above the broad sees and moves the nature. The spirit grows and voices, thoughts, voices. Speech grows and voices, and thoughts come down from high. Everything is from high, from inside only. The soul is coming, surging past. A new birth takes place. It takes place in Savitri. Normally it happens and it happens here in Savitri practically. Her spirit soars high and joins its source of the summits of her being. Just now I told you. Spirit soars high and joins its source on the summits of her being. A new force descends into her soul. New force descends into her soul and she is totally changed. That alchemy is practically done here, totally changed. Her mortal elements are displaced by a young divine infusion. Mortal elements are totally changed by a young divine infusion. Pain, grief, all are left behind. Her mind is still. Then she lays down the dead body on the forest soil, lays down the dead body on the forest soil, and turns to meet the dreadful Lord of God of Death, who is the veritable denial of all. Lord of Death, maximum time in our wrong words, wrong terms we use as Jama or something, but actually here it has been the Lord has been described as Lord of Death, a God of Death, who is the veritable denial of all. He fixes his forbidding look upon her and asks her to unclasp her hold upon the soul of Satyavan and return back to earth. So let us have a beautiful glance and have let us see that gorgeous description, glorious description by the Mahayogi. All in her mated with that mighty hour, all in her mated with that mighty hour, as if the last remnant had been slain by death of the humanity that once was hers. Nothing is, everything has been snatched away. So we can go. Her grief had passed away, her mind was still. Over was the haunted pain, the rending fear. Her grief had passed away, her mind was still. Her heart beat quietly with a sovereign force. There came a freedom from the heartstrings clutch. Then we can find soul now she rose to meet the dreadful God. The dead who is still reposed upon her breast and bore to turn away from the dead form. Soul now she rose to meet the dreadful God. So this is actually preparation. First time she is rising to face the dreadful God. Again we can find there is a good scene. Then, like a tree recovering from a wind, she raised her noble head, recovering from the heavy wind, from tempest. She is recovering from a wind. Like that comparison, like a tree, she is raising her noble head. Fronting her gaze, something stood there, honoredly, somber, grand, feeling, facing, and of course seeing. Something stood there, unearthly, not of this earth, sombre and grand. A limitless denial of all being, that's what we have seen. That wore the terror and wonder of a safe. So later we can find beautiful two opposed each other with their eyes, woman and universal God. Two opposed each other with their eyes, one in one side that woman in form of Savitri and the universal God around her, piling their void unbearable loneliness upon her mighty uncompanioned soul. So we can find the dreadful voice. A sad and a formidable voice arose. For the first time, you can hear the destructive voice of the Lord of Death, which seemed to hold adverse worlds. Unclasped, it cried. Thy passionate influence and relax, O slave of nature, changing to love, changeless law, who vainly reached rebellion to my yoke, thy elemental grasp, weep and forget, entomb thy passion in its living grave. Entomb thy passion in thy living grave, you go unclasped. So it is coming on, and of course, when later we can find this is the leave now the once loved spirit's abandoned robe, pass lonely back to thy vain life on earth. It ceased, she moved not, there no change. She moved not, and spoke again. It again spoke. Initially, there is a awful, dreadful voice. Then, actually, the stone is lowered, lowering its mighty key to human chords. Yet a dread cry behind the uttered sentence. Little bit low, but actually, still it is dreadful. Dread cry behind the uttered sounds. So, enrolling all sadness and immortal scorn, mourned like a hunger of far wandering waves, mourned like a hunger of far wandering voice. You can find, wilt thou forever keep thy passionate hold, thyself a creature doomed like him to pass? Your destiny also same how and what he has faced. Denying his soul death's calm and silent rest, then relax thy grasp, this body is ours and thine. Relax thy grasp, this body is ours and thine, his spirit now belongs to a greater power. O man, thy husband suffers. That is the topic of discussion. We have taken it as a caption. O man, thy husband suffers. Savitri drew back her heart's force that clasped his body still. Now draws back. Then softly it lay it upon before in sleep. That is what. She rose and stood gathered in lonely strength, now preparing, almost fronting the Lord of Death with her eyes. It is the with the entire force of the soul. She rose and stood gathered in lonely strength like one who drops his mantle for a race and waits the signal motionlessly swift. She knew not up to what course her spirit above on the crypt summit of the sacred form. Then she's fronting, trying to front out of the eternal depths and cast its surge. Then death, the king, leaned boundless down. Just imagine how at which it has been described. Death is leaning. Then death, the king, leaned boundless down as leaned the night over tired lands. Over tired lands, the huge night is leaning like that death leans boundless. Even when evening pales and the fading gleams break upon the horizon's wall, tired and helpless lands, and the night is leaning with fury, fire and fury. So, nor at the dusk grows mystic with the moon. The dim and awful Godhead rose erect from its brief stooping to his touch on earth. And like a dream that wakes out of a dream, that fantastic description you can find that comparison. Like a dream that wakes out of a dream, forsaking the poor mood of that dead clay, another luminous Satyavan arose. From the body, another luminous Satyavan arose. Starting upright from the recumbent earth, as if someone ever viewless border stopped. So we can go a little bit forward. Between just the course here. Only the spirit knew the spirit still, and the heart divined old loved heart, though changed. Between two realms he stood, not wavering, but fixed in quiet, strong expectancy, like one who, sightless, listens for a command. So we are the immobile on that earthly field, immobile on the earthly field, a lot of deaths, luminous Satyavan, and a human Savitri, of course. Then we can find that a good example, good description here. And Savitri moved behind eternal death. Her mortal pace was equal with the gods. Her mortal pace was equal with the gods. Wordless she travelled in her lover's steps. Wordless she travelled in her lover's steps, and planting her human feet where his had trod into the perilous silences beyond. So have one. Let us have brief some couple of lines of summarization. Then we'll go to the next phase of discussion. Savitri does not move. The voice warns her of that her husband suffers and she should let him go. That was the warning from the Lord of Death. She then draws back her heart's force that had held him still and rises gathered in her strength. Leaves the corpse of the husband, Satyavan, I mean, then stands erect, rises gathered in her strength. Death leans to the earth and then rises. Satyavan forsakes his body. Satyavan forsakes his body, and a new luminous form from him, of him, rises up. Savitri is unable to reach this lustrous form, unable to reach this lustrous form, the luminous form which has arisen out of Satyavan's body, from Satyavan. Unable to reach this lustrous form through her mind and senses, but her spirit knows his spirit. That is what. Spirit knows his spirit. He stands between Savitri on one side and the Lord of Death on the another. On in between two, she is actually staying. She stands between Savitri and the Lord of Death, and on one side and Lord of Death on the another. There is a silent struggle to draw him from their either side. Silent struggle between the human Savitri and the dreadful god, Lord of Death, and there is a struggle to draw him from from either side. So they now move on. Satyavan in front, death behind them, and Savitri behind eternal death. I mean, in the very front, Satyavan, and in the very end is Savitri. In between is Lord of Death. Their journey proceeds through airy spaces as if on the tops of the forest trees. The Earth's pull on Savitri increases because you know gravitational force and all. So Earth's pull on Savitri increases. It looks at one stage as if both Satyavan and Death are fast moving away from her reach because they are now they are actually ethereal bodies in of course in a luminous form of soul they are moving fast, but her passionate spirit soars towards Satyavana and she goes into the deep trance. She goes into the deep trance. Human Savitri is forgotten. That is what. Human Savitri is forgotten through this, after going into the deep trance. Her will opens out and holds the Satyavan captive. Will opens out and holds Satyavan captive. They proceed on their course through strange realms where the souls are not only living moods exist. Let us see. Let us summarize it. Let us read few lines. Original lines. We'll see. Then Sri Aurobindo, at first, in a blind stress of woods, she moved. Already we have seen blind stress of woods, she moved with strange inhuman paces on the soil. Strange inhuman paces on the soil, and she is actually moving, journeying as if upon an unseen road around her on the green and imaged earth. Then this is the one that description we can find, that great description is there. A burden which her being remotely bore, herself lived far in some uplifted scene, where to the transclaimed vision of pursuit soul presences in a high spaceless dream. Then the luminous spirit glided stilly on, and the great shadow travelled vague behind. Already we know they are moving in with a great pace. So her senses felt earth's close and a gentle air, that pull, that drag is there, clinging round them, and in troubled branches new, uncertain treadings of a faint food wind. She bore dim fragrances, far callings touched, the wild bird's voice and the winged rustle came. That great description we can see. So the ancient mother offered to her child her simple world of kind familiar things, but now, as if the body's senses hold curbing the godhead of her infinity work, had freed those spirits in their to their grander road across her boundaries intangible bar. Then the silent God grew mighty and remote. The silent God grew mighty and remote. We can find letter so in a terror and a wrath divine from her airy streams against the ascending death. So it is a fierce sea eagle threatened in her brood, born on a rush of puissance and cry out winging like a mass of golden fire. That is a description we can find and later. She crossed the border of dividing sense, crossed the borders of the dividing sense on a spirit flaming outrush born. Like pale discarded seeds dropped dully down, her mortal members fell back from her soul. Mortal members fell back from her soul. So, her aim, joy, origin, Satyavan alone. You can see her aim, joy, origin, Satyavan alone. Her sovereign, present in her being's core, he beat there like a rhythmic heart herself, but a different still one loved, enveloped, clasped. So we can find her spirit fulfilled in his spirit, rich with all time, as if love's deathless moment had been found. Still in this region, in this extraordinary luminous realm, we can find a as if a deathless moment had been found, a pearl within eternity's white shell. Then we can find she seemed to travel on a visioned shape, imagining other musers like herself. Like clefts of unsubstantial memory, senses often traversed, never lived in, played, past her unheeding to forgotten goals. So, a doubting space where dreaming objects lived. Again, we can find that unconscious, on uncertain spaces, tracks is moving. Country was around them, strange far skies above. A doubting space where dreaming objects lived. Then that big descriptions are there. Where, where the grasses, where the treeless plains, where ran the road, where like far hastening towards that of which it has most terror past. Phantasmal between the pillared conscious rocks, somber and high, gets brooding, like this it is coming. Then we can find another voice. But death pealed forth his vast abysmal cry. But death pealed forth his vast abysmal cry in the very big manner. Aspire not to accompany, that's what. Aspire not to accompany, O mortal, turn back to thy transient kind. O mortal, turn back to thy transient kind. Aspire not to accompany death to his home. Go back to your frail transient kind. Don't try to accompany death to his home. As if thy breath could live where time must die. That is a great threatening from the death. He is pulling forth the abysmal cry, his vast abysmal cry. Think not thy mind-born person strength from heaven to uplift thy spirit from its earthly base, because he is soaring up. Now itself she is in equal track with the dreadful God, and of course with the luminous Satyavan once on his husband, like in the form of his husband. So later we can find, let not the dreadful goddess move thy soul to enlarge thy vehement trespass into the worlds where itself perish like a helpless thought. Then we can go a little bit further and see, O sleeper, dreaming of a divinity. O sleeper, sleeping and dreaming. O sleeper, dreaming of divinity, with wake trembling mid the indifferent silences. Wake trembling mid the indifferent silences in which the few weak gods being die. You don't have the that much power, that much strength, so everything will you will perish. You, O sleeper, dreaming of divinity, wake trembling mid the indifferent silences in which thy few weak chords of being die. Impermanent creature, again that awful dreadful voice, serious voice you can see listen. Impermanent creature, sorrowful foam of time, your transient loves bind not the eternal gods. Your love is transient and the gods are, of course, eternal. This voice ceases, ebbed in the consenting hush, which seemed to choose a close upon it wide intense, a wordless sanction from the judge of night, the woman answered not. Woman here is Savitri, answered not. Her high nude soul stripped of the girdle of mortality, stripped of the girdle of mortality, nude soul. Against fixed destiny and the groups of law stood up in its sheer will a primal force. Already we saw that much adamant, that much prepared, that much strengthful. Still, like a statue on a pedestal, lone in the silence and to vastness bare, against midnight's dumb abysses piled in front, a columned shaft of fire and light she rose. Just imagine how great the description is there after the woman Savitri is described, who is powerful in her own strength. Of course, everything is contained, everything is regarding soul. So let us come to the final conclusion, concluding lines. They arrive at the brooding gates of the pillared rocks opening into the giant night. Arrive at the brooding gates of pillared rocks opening into the giant night. They have reached their boundary. Death speaks to Savitri that she must not go back. She must now go back and not aspire to accompany him to his home. Just as we have shown, you go back, don't aspire to accompany death to his home. She can't survive there. Man can live safe only within the human limits. Already we have seen only in limits man lives safe. Already we have seen. So only in human limits can man live safe. So you don't have anything to do there. You go back, and she must be sensible. Otherwise, she is sure to perish. Then at the very concluding page we see, but Savitri does not answer. Her high nude soul stands up against the fixed destiny. Jatasya hi dhruvang mrityu, that's what you have to come back. That fear, psychosis, everything. And the groups of love and against the dark abysses piled up in front of her. She rises up like a columned shaft of fire and light. So that much beautiful preparation that has been done, and she is already everything, because not a preparation of human preparation. She is originally the divine mother in form of Savitri. Here she is standing for the, not for Satyavan. He is Satyavan is just a representative, and he is there who is the representing the world, and of course from the side of love and from entire world she is trying to of course stand firmly and war against the victorious death till now, and their victory is ultimately going to be certain with that mission she has come. Then last two lines, try to two three lines will try to read it out. Still like a statue on its pedestal, lone in the silence and to vastness bare, against midnight dome abysses piled in front, a columned shaft of fire and light, she rose. Just imagine how the great description it has been described in glorious lines, and it is the time, the initial indication we can find how Savitri is coming to begin again her divine unfinished work. She is prepared. She is representing the entire the universe who is under the mercy of this dreadful power, and she is confident the victory is ultimately sure. Vande Mataram.